G'day guys, welcome back to the Play on Footy YouTube channel. Today we're going to be rounding up the round 19 games. What a round it was. There were a couple of surprises, but most of the games went according to plan and my tips. The only games that I tipped incorrectly basically was Lions and Sydney. I did tip Sydney over Lions and they did overthrow Sydney. The Lions, they were pretty good, and the other game which I did tip incorrectly was the Cats and the Dogs. I did go the Cats, but yeah, the Dogs were just far too good. I had a really wet game at GMHBA, so that was a very, very surprising outcome. And the last game actually that I did tip incorrectly was the first game of the round, which is the Bombers versus Crows. I did tip the Bombers and the Crows just got the job done by a massive effort by Ben Keys kicking 5 goals. So with that, we'll start with the very first game, Bombers and Crows. It was a bit of a topsy-turvy game in terms of Bombers' ball movement probably wasn't as smooth as what they had shown in previous games. But yeah, to lose to the Crows, I didn't tip it. So I didn't see this loss coming. The Bombers have had a pretty good sort of draw to start the year. And some have said that their end of the year was probably one of the easiest runs, considering the Crows' form of recent times. But yeah, Bombers really did miss Nick Martin, who struggled to have a bit of an impact early, but did find his feet in the last quarter. Likewise, Caldwell. I'm unsure if they did get tagged, but I know that Bond was on merit from the Crows. And for Nick Martin, I'm a little bit unsure if he was tagged or not, but it certainly felt like his presence wasn't felt as much as in some other games this year. But yeah, Langford up forward did quite well for the Bombers. And then obviously, as I mentioned earlier, Ben Keys for the Crows. No Tex Walker, so Ben Keys steps up without obviously Isaac Rankin as well. And he, kicked 5 goals and arguably won them the game. So yeah, that was a big surprise. Are Bombers frauds? Well, they can't afford to lose any other games on the home run, and if they do, they are going to be out of the 8. Similarly, we'll get to the Collingwood game against Hawks, but they find themselves in a similar position. The next game is the Giants versus Suns. This one was at the NG Stadium, Giants home ground. Again, Suns just basically following the trend that they cannot win away. And Giants were just too good. Tom Green, from the Giants midfield, really stood up in the absence of Stephen Coniglio, and basically is just back to his best. Likewise, Lockie Whitfield just run off half-back effortlessly. And then for the Suns, Flanders. But apart from that, I really couldn't really tell you who else really put their hand in the fire and tried to win the game for the Suns. Just too many passengers, and I think Dimmo was right a couple of weeks ago. He said the team needs to mature and really, sort of step up if they want to contend for finals, let alone a premiership. And yeah, it's evident in any away game in particularly that the Suns just are not there yet. Who's to say next year they can't be, but we'll wait and see. But I definitely know the Giants definitely have that hunger back. And yeah, they're definitely a team to watch heading into the finals, that's for sure. The next game is Saints versus Eagles. A bit of a nothing game this game. Obliterated by 70+ points. Caretaker coach Jared Schofield basically was a bit of at a loss at the press conference. Basically said they didn't show or follow any of the procedures that they had in place prior to the game. And then post game, Oscar Allen was absolutely torched by Glenn Jakovic, saying that he challenges him, Oscar Allen, in terms of the players aren't hurting. 0 tackles inside 50 from the Eagles just shows that maybe their entries in the forward 50 haven't been that great. Their midfield obviously isn't up to scratch by AFL standards anyway, the Eagles. But yeah, to have any excuse beyond what we've been seeing this year is basically just inexcusable. I think the lack of accountability at the Eagles at the moment is what's really hurting. And for the Saints to come out and belt us by that much, just shows that there's just no identity in the way that the Eagles are playing, and it's just whatever. I think the players are there to collect paychecks, and that's about it. So it's going to take a real strong voice to lead the next charge, and it's going to be an overhaul, cultural overhaul at the Eagles for 2025, that's for sure. But yeah, I commend the Saints. They were great. I think Tim Membry was just freed up immensely. I argue that the Saints are better without Max King. They play better. Membry had just more free reign, him and Higgins. And this is, mind you, this is no Philippou in this team. If they had Philippou in this team, I think it would have been 100 plus easily. Rowan Marshall's the best ruck in the comp, probably close second is Cherry at the moment. So the Saints do have a lot right. They probably just need to get a couple of players in this year's draft, and they're pretty well set. Look at Hawks, for example. That's surging along at the moment. Let's get to that game now. Hawks versus Collingwood. The Hawks got it done pretty easily, and it was a quite embarrassing affair, let's be honest. Jack Ginnivan taunting the Magpie Army with his little sleep gesture, and yeah, basically got best on ground by far. Over 20 touches, kicked a couple or 3 goals, I think it was. But yeah, just Collingwood had no answers, and they look slow, they look old. Their list is very beyond mature at the moment. They need to rebuild ASAP. They need to move some players on and start that process pretty swiftly if they're going to keep in that sort of competitive window and not completely fall off like the Eagles have. But yeah, it's not looking good for Collingwood any further. They definitely need to hit the draft hard, and no different to that's what the Saints are doing as well. They played finals last year, and now they can't even get close to it. I definitely think they're trying to get some picks. Not that I condone tanking, but it's pretty evident. But the Hawks were just too good. Their ball movement and tack on the foot in the pressure. I think one of the big standouts for them is Lloyd Meek this year. I think he really commanded the ruck, and up against Darcy Cameron, who is a pretty solid ruck in itself. That's no mean feat really, and I think that the Hawks with Lloyd Meek has really helped their game plan going forward. Down back, I think Blake Hardwick's been a great addition. He's a bit of a swing man and go forward and back, but I think they just got that versatility now, the Hawks, and yeah, definitely a team to watch going forward. Cats versus Dogs. This one was a bit of a disappointing game for the Cats. I captured a little bit of it, 2/4 of it towards the end. Their start wasn't fantastic, but their end, they just couldn't finish it off, and the Dogs just put the foot on the throat basically. The conditions, they had a VFL match before the AFL match at GMHBA, so the ground wasn't too flash. No excuse, of course, but you'd think the Cats would be used to that sort of wet weather footy, but the Dogs, the opposite, because they play most of their games indoor at Marvel. But the Dogs were just, it didn't faze them. So that to me was surprising. But yeah, the Bont had an okay game. Treloar was fantastic. He was a great addition back into the side. Even Fraser was quite good, the young dog. Darcy was okay, Sam Darcy. And then for the Cats, it was really just one man, Tommy Stewart and Holmes, really, that sort of led the charge there. So Cats have a lot to work on. I'm not saying they're going to miss finals, but yeah, they can't afford to lose any more going to the final run. Port versus Richmond, another bit of a nothing game. Port were fantastic, I thought, in patches, but not throughout the whole game. They really could have put Richmond away, but Richmond, to their credit, came out with a fighting spirit. Nank got sort of subbed off tactically in the last quarter, I think it was. So they put Ryan Sampson in the ruck, and then for Port, Sweet did okay in the ruck. But yeah, the ball getters like Rosie, Butters was okay, but Rosie was pretty outstanding. He would have had a big AFL fantasy game, but he got, I think he got injured, like a hip sort of complaint, so he went out in the last quarter. Lions versus Sydney, this one was a big game, 2 points in it in the end. I did tip Sydney. Sydney did have a fair few injuries. I think they had Hayward at one point, then McInerney went down, and then Papley, so they were down on the bench quite a bit. But then Lions had Harris that went down as well from the back line. I thought the Lions did quite well. They started strong with Danaher kicking 3 goals out of the 4 set shots that he had in that opening quarter. But then, yeah, in the tail end, sort of the third quarter was won by Lions, and then, won by Sydney, and then in the fourth quarter, definitely Lions hit back and definitely won the last quarter and evidently the game. So I think going into finals, you cannot discredit Lions. They've done a tremendous job to come back where they were, especially amidst the Vegas scandal, whatever truth of that was. But yeah, the Sydney Swans, you can't write them off. But yeah, it's a hard win at the Gabba. I mean, teams have done it like Carlton did at the start of the season, but admittedly Lions weren't the same team that they are now. So it's definitely going to be an interesting watch. Warner had a bit of a quiet game, Heaney as well, but Goulden again really stood up for Sydney, so that was great to see. The next game is Dockers versus Demons, bit of a nothing game as well. The Dockers came out swinging with Tracy, kicking I think 3-2, and then yeah, the Demons really only had Harrison Petty really put up a fight because he obviously shouldered a lot of the ruck load from Max Gawn in his absence. And then, yeah, Sarong and Brayshaw for Dockers in their midfield basically took advantage of the lackluster Demons midfield. Clary is nowhere near it this season, but we all know that. But yeah, all throughout, I think probably Stephen May was one of the better players for Melbourne on that day. He did help a fair bit in Demons' defence. Especially, yeah, trying to play on Tracy, who was really on fire for the whole game. But yeah, you cannot discredit Dockers. I think Dockers are in the prime seat, and they've worked really hard this season, and will definitely, most likely, I predict they will finish in top 4, which is a tremendous effort for Dockers, for sure. So I definitely think they can challenge Sydney, and I definitely think they can challenge Lions. So I think, yeah, the bogey team, I should say, for the Dockers is really Carlton, and that was in the Adelaide game, which was a little bit, a bit of an interesting finale to that one, umpiring error-wise, so don't write them off. And the last game was Blues versus North. Yeah, I thought that Charlie Kerno was fantastic. From the most part, it wasn't up to where I thought the Blues are actually at. Like, apart from Kerno nearly kicking 5 goals, which I did have him down for. Mackay, he was okay. TDK wasn't, like, I think there must have been some sort of small sort of niggle he's dealing with. He in my opinion is better than Pitternet, so I'm not going to say like play Pitternet more and TDK forward. I don't think that's the right thing for the team. But yeah, Cherry did really well in the ruck for North. George Wardlaw did fantastic. LDU did fantastic. Sheasel did fantastic. Who's another one? Even down back, like Core, he did okay. Like he's had a pretty good season, Core. A lot of people have given him flack, but I think he's had a pretty solid season. And then to have Comben forward, I thought that was an interesting move by Alistair Clarkson. He ended up kicking 3 goals, I believe. So, I mean, he trained in the preseason as a forward. So, I think he is the guy to back up Nick Larkey. And, I think if that's what Alistair Clarkson's going for, I don't think that's a bad move at all. So, yeah, I think overall, North were very, I think, not unlucky. They did blow their chances at times, but the Blues really weren't anything special. They just ticked that box, moved on to next week. So in terms of most informed sides at the moment, it's got to be number 1, Hawks, 2nd, Lions, and then 3rd, I'm probably going to put it down to, who are we going to say here? I don't want to say the Dogs just yet. Like, I don't want to go too early, but I think the Giants would have to be 3rd at the moment. Close, probably tied with Dockers. Giants and Dockers are 3rd. So I think they're the most informed teams at the moment. But what do you guys reckon? Comment down below, like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.